Our next talk is by Dr. Shanmugh on algorithms in the next generation sequencing. Dr. Shanmugh has a PhD in electrical engineering from the Indian Institute of Science, and at Strand Life Sciences he works on the tools for analysis of the next generation sequencing data.
My name is Shanmugh. Shanmugh Katragadda. So I've been with Strand for the last 3 years, and I've been working on tool for NGS data analysis. We're actually developing a tool called Avadis NGS, which analyzes the NGS data and derives some results out of those data. So after the nice overview of Chandru on computational biology history, so I thought we'll be able to go a bit deeper into some of the computational techniques used in computational biology. So I have taken one specific algorithm that we widely use in NGS data analysis called alignment. So I will explain to you what this alignment is all about and describe the algorithm that we have implemented in our tool Avadis NGS. So before going into the details, here is the outline. First, I'll briefly tell you about NGS and what the alignment problem is with respect to next-gen sequencing. And we will see a couple of solutions for this alignment problem. And finally, we will see some extensions and optimizations that are possible actually here. I think some of these have already been covered in the previous talk. So we all know that the DNA present in the cells contain the genetic code, and they are actually sequences of 4 different molecules, A, G, C, T. And the Human Genome Project completed the complete sequence of the entire genome, and we know that we have 3 billion bases in the genome, and they have created what is called the reference genome actually. And the NGS itself is the technology that is used to read this genetic code from the cells. So we take the human or any organism's cells and then pass it through a couple of lab preparations, and then a sequencing machine which will give us a sequence of these four characters essentially. So the reference genome for the human beings, the human cell, is 3 billion long. So as you can see, it will be a stream of characters like A, G, T, C like this. And if you take any subject, any particular person, and then sample the genome, so you will also have another sequence like this. But most important fact is actually most of this genomic sequence is common across all the people. More than 99% of the human DNA is common, and this remaining 1% or even less than 1%, where you see the differences between the different human beings, let's say, so is what makes us unique and makes us different from the other people. And important thing is actually these differences actually can tell us about how one responds to diseases and other therapies also. So this is what makes NGS important from the point of view of clinical diagnostics as well. So what kind of data we get out of this NGS technology? Let's see. So currently the technology is not available to read the entire sequence from start to end. So the most we can do is read a couple of hundreds of bases, or at most a few thousands of bases from the sequence. So what we do to compensate for that is we take the sequence to be read and make multiple copies of that sequence and chop that sequence into small fragments at random points and read these small fragments. Actually, we have a pool of fragments from this process. So then the sequencers are given this pool of fragments, and the sequencers read those fragments and give us the sequence of ATGC characters actually. So now the problem is we don't have the complete sequence. We don't get the complete sequence like this. Instead, we get multiple small fragments read from different parts of the genome here. So what we also do not know from where it came actually. So the alignment problem is all about finding out from where it came in the reference actually. So if you take this as the reference, so we need to map these read sequences that we got from the NGS sequencers and find out from where they came. So some of these reads could have an exact match like this one, and some could actually match with with one or two errors. For example, here there is a mismatch, and it's also possible to have some gaps like deletions or insertions. So some of the bases actually could be missing, or some extra bases could be there when compared to the reference genome actually. So, but why do we have these mismatches and gaps? As we had already seen, the subject genome could be different from the reference. Reference actually is collected from a certain set of individuals. But if you take any particular individual, then it could be slightly different from the standard reference genome. Also, the reading process itself could be erroneous, which could cause some errors in the reading of the bases. So, due to these problems, we will always have inexact matches actually. So, that is what the alignment problem needs to take care of while aligning these reads. So at the outset it looks like a simple problem, but it turns out to be complex due to various reasons. The size of the data itself is one problem. So the reference is very long, 3 billion bases, and when we actually sequence the whole genome with reasonable depth, then we get a billion or even more reads, which will be about 100 GB or 200 GB of file. Yes, sorry.
Yeah, you can answer this. 3 billion bases, are all the cells of an organism, do they have exactly the same code, or what is the percentage of variation? Because to copy something a billion times without a single error looks to be probabilistically impractical, impossible. There is some error correction process going on, but I don't know what is the
Yeah, but all the cells actually have the same code, but they get different inputs, and based on the different inputs they react in a different way.
Has this been sort of validated that the process of replication is super reliable in that you have to replicate some tray one? I don't know how many cells are there.
No, actually, you're right. There can be errors introduced, and we also know that things like telomeres and so on can.
Yeah.
And so as you age, for example, the telomeres can cause errors and can get shorter, and that will cause errors. And so that's one of the problems of why people are get more disease when they get older. The chances of these mutations happening.
So there was a recent paper last year. They studied a lot of families, so father, mother, child, and to see that every single base in the child's genome, could it be explained by either the father's or the mother's thing, or how many new things arise in the child's DNA. And they found that approximately there are 50 new changes in an individual, and that depends on the age at which the child is born, and depends primarily on the father's age apparently. So the later in life you have kids, your kids are going to be more distinctive, let's say.
So none of these things have to be viewed as a bad thing,
Yeah.
right? Sometimes they are bad, and you have to deal with that. But it's this is also the way by which natural selection has happened, and the species is progressing. So you don't necessarily think of this as a bad thing. The remarkable thing is that for the most part, the replication works. And so you're essentially walking around, you're a multiprocessor machine, highly parallel, with the same code that is processing for each cell. So,
just to clarify that, there are two types of mutations. They are called germline mutations and somatic mutations. Somatic mutations are those which are just caused in a specific tissue, but they're not passed on to the next generation. So if you have cancer, for instance, cancer is usually triggered by somatic mutations. Either you're exposed to a lot of UV or smoking or asbestos, whatever radiation and all, that will cause mutations in the DNA at a higher frequency that they don't get corrected. And then it causes somatic mutation, but it's specific to a tissue. And the germline mutations are those that happen in the sperm cells and all, which are actually passed on to the next generation. So the germline mutation rate is around 50 or so, let us say, per generation. At the same time, you also asked, is every one of our cells in the body having the same DNA content? To a large extent, yes. But there's a small amount of things called mosaicism, saying that there is a sort of a spectrum of DNA across your body itself. That is only very recently coming into notice. Until now, it was assumed that everything would have more or less the same DNA.
So what triggers a cell to be a blood cell or and a muscle cell? And
Yeah, those are different. Those, so they will go into fundamental developmental biology, but until the embryo is 8-cell stage, every single cell is exactly the same at the 8-cell stage. After that, certain things start becoming different. The top cells start having slightly different protein expressions, the bottom ones have slightly different levels of RNA, and from there on it goes up.
do we have anything like a synthetic model? I'm sure there are models, and just in fact to comment on your talk, maybe what another way of paraphrasing your liver model is, even before Newton wrote F equal to ma, we were building huge temples, we were building pyramids and so on and so forth. So work could be done on a grand scale, but the simplification and the insights of Newton's laws caused a huge flourishing, further development of engineering and science.
Yeah, you should actually read Professor Rodam Narasimha's writings on computational positivism.
Yes.
And so our cultural roots are in computational positivism. That we didn't need axioms because we would compute, right? And so and things were true because they could be computed, right? So that's where the computational positivism comes from. So it's I think they're fundamentally engineered, right?
Okay, so the reference itself is 3 billion bases long, and the reads, number of reads could be about a couple of billion, and we need to account for mismatches and gaps while we do the alignment, and we need to handle a variety of read lengths as well. Some of the sequences give variable read length reads, so and above all, we need to do all this in a reasonable computing resources. Typically, the alignment requires large amount of memory and exceptional CPU performance. Okay, so let's start with exact match. How do we go about doing an exact match, and then we see how we can extend it to handle the case of inexact match. So one obvious way is to just scan the entire reference genome, but we know that it's very slow. So the other approach is to index the reference to speed up the search. So here we have one solution based on suffix tree based index. So this is the sequence, the reference sequence in our case, which is the basic sequence, and we have a read sequence which we are trying to find out where it came from in the sequence actually. So as you see here, the root, the suffix tree, the first level of nodes are all the characters. So A, G, A, C, G, T, and they point to location where, let's say if you take, there's only one A here. So for that reason, this A is the leaf node and it points to the location where it is present in the sequence there. And if you take C actually occurs at multiple locations. So CG is one, and CG here also, and CGA, CGC. Till you get a unique sequence, you develop the tree, and then finally you actually point it back to the location where that unique sequence is present in the reference actually. So once you have constructed this, given any other string like this, the CGC here, so you can actually find out the location where it's present in the reference sequence. So once you look at the first character, you traverse this tree based on the sequence of characters here. So C, G, and T, C, CGC. So you have ended up at a leaf node. So this points to the location, the fourth location here, where you find the sequence CGC actually. So this is the suffix tree based approach. So it's obviously much faster than the naive scanning of the entire reference. But one big problem with this is the index requires the whole tree needs to be stored, and it requires a very large amount of memory actually. Yeah. So the question is, can this be compressed, and is there a way in which we can store the index in a smaller amount of memory and still do the alignment problem without losing any accuracy actually? So it turns out that there is a solution based on the well-known Burrows-Wheeler transform, which was originally proposed for compression, but later it was realized that it could be used even for exact string match. So here is how the Burrows-Wheeler transform is constructed. This is the reference sequence, and here we have all the circular shifts of this sequence, all possible circular shifts, but we have sorted them in lexicographical order here actually. So, and the reference sequence itself we have terminated with a specific character $, and together with that terminator we have circularly shifted and then lexicographically sorted, so to get this whole array. And the last column of this is what is called the Burrows-Wheeler transform actually. So this is the Burrows-Wheeler transform, and as you see here, all these circular shifts are also linked to their locations in the original sequence. Yeah, so this AC subsequence, actually the substring is actually present at this location, so it goes here. So likewise for every substring that is present here, we have a pointer to the original sequence. So you see these form the index now. So we can make we can actually search for a string based on this, and you see that this is a linear tree, linear array rather than a tree which we had in the earlier case. So this makes things a bit different. So if you look at the complete index that we need to store in this case, again as an example, this is the string that we are interested in as a reference, and then these are the circular shifts. This is the BWT. This is the suffix array. The pointers that were shown in the previous slide are actually given as a suffix array, which actually point to the locations in this array. So to store the complete index, we need 4 things: A, B, C, and D. So A is the suffix array, and B is the first column here, and C is the last column, which is also called the Burrows-Wheeler transform. And D is an additional matrix that we need. So at each location, for each character we have the rank. For example, at this location, at this boundary between these two, so we have a value for A. How many A's are above this particular location? So there are two A's above this, so we store this. Likewise, actually we need to store for each of the characters. If in this case it's an English alphabet here, so we need to have everything from A to Z. We need to have the frequencies of their occurrences above that level actually. So if you look at the last one, there are 5 A's altogether, so we have D of A is 5 actually. So once we have this 4 A, B, C, D, then we are ready to do the string search. So let's see how that search happens. So this is the string that we are interested in searching. So we actually start from the rightmost token, the last token, B, and search in this, because these are already lexicographically ordered. We know where the range where the B occurs actually. So we are sort of shortlisting the entire range, and once we have this, then we look at the end, and we need to look at the next character and the rank for that. So the second character is A, and rank for A at this place is 0. There are 0 A's above that, so it's 0. And rank for A at this location is 2. So these two we need to look at, and this helps us in going to the next level of next range, updated range, where we need to look for. So 0 to 2 is the range here. So we need to look at the range where A's are present, and in that from 0 to 2 is the subset we are interested in now. So once we have this, again the same step. So we need to look at the next. Look at the ranks for the next character, which is D. So for D it is 0 here, there is nothing above that, and here it is 1. So 0 to 1 is the range that we need to look at. So but D, actually there is only one row, so 0 to 1 is that one itself. So we are already at that character, at this whole string. DAB is present at this location. So 6 is the place where DAB is present in this complete sequence actually. So this is how it operates, but we need to see how much memory it requires, and is it really beneficial, or is it more effective than the suffix tree approach. So if you look at these 4 data structures that we need to store, for A we need to actually store 3 billion pointers, which is 12 GB, and for B, because it's a sorted list, we just need to know the locations of each of the different characters, and in our case only 4 characters are there, we just need to store 3 pointers. And for C, it's just 2 bits per character in our case, because only 4 characters, so 2 bits per element. Then we will have 750 MB requirement here. And for D, it is again 3 billion into, at each location we have 4 numbers. So 4 into 4, so we will have 48 GB. So overall it turns out to be that the requirement is even much higher compared to suffix tree, so more than 60 GB actually. But the important fact is that the arrays A and D, we don't need to store the complete arrays. If our goal is just being able to search a particular string and get an exact match for that string, so we just need to, we can just sample these 2 arrays and store only the sampled versions. For example, if you just store every 8th location, so that means here every 8th pointer will store, and here at every 8th position we store these values for ATGC. So then the memory requirement actually comes down to about 9 GB. And so once we store only the sampled arrays, how do we do the actual search, we need to see actually. So here on this side it's quite easy. So if you are, let's say, at a particular location and you are interested in knowing the ranks at that location, so you just need to go to the nearest place where you have the ranks available, and then look the characters that are present in between, and then update the frequencies there actually. So we have the frequencies at the desired location. On this side, once we have arrived at the last, once we have completed processing the string, so we are at this location. Let's say we don't have the pointer given here. So here whatever is struck off, the pointers are not there. Only every 3rd one we have given actually, every 4th one. So now from here we need to get the actual location of D. This is actually 6, but it's not available here. So we can actually trace back and arrive at this location. From D we should actually point it back to the D on this, go back to the location, corresponding location in BWT, and from here come this side, and from here again go back to this BWT, till you arrive at a place where you have the pointer available actually, the location available. So typically if you store every 8th or every 16th value, it's not a big computational overhead. So, but in case of small memory systems like 4 GB, we need to do further subsampling, and then the computational time will increase, but the memory requirement is less. That's the trade-off that we have between memory and computational speed. So, but all that we have done so far is exact match actually. Given a string, we will find if there is an exact match in the reference, we will know where the exact match is present actually. But in our case, we need to see how to handle the gaps and mismatches. So, yeah. So what we do in this case is actually from the read, we find substrings of the read which have exact matches in the reference. For example, in this read, there's a 15 base substring which has exact matches at various locations in the reference. And likewise, this 15 base substring has exact matches at various multiple locations. And likewise, if you look at this 30 base substring has only one match. Likewise, we will find all the seeds, the so-called seeds which have exact matches in the reference, and use them to proceed further. So we essentially do a dynamic programming around each of these seeds and see if we can actually fit the rest of the read into the reference with minimal number of mismatches and gaps. So this is what we do. Once we get the seed that is used as an anchor and we have a certain set of penalties that we associate with mismatches and gaps. So use those penalties and make sure that you get an optimal solution for the alignment problem around that location. So that is what will give an optimal alignment at a particular location actually. So with this, the overall approach for the alignment is we create the BWT index, which is just one-time pre-processing, and we have seen that it can be subsampled to fit into our available memory. And after that, we have a bunch of reads which we need to be aligned against the reference. So for each read, we find the seeds with exact matches, and we have a logic that we use to shortlist the seeds. We can't process all the seeds. If we get a large number of seeds, it is difficult to process. So we actually shortlist based on the length as well as certain other characteristics. And after that, we do DP, dynamic programming, around each of these seeds, shortlisted seeds, to find possible mappings. And among those possible mappings at these different locations, we select the best mapping based on the alignment score actually. So that's the overall approach. So in terms of advantages compared to other approaches, here the seed length is not specified in advance. So whether you process long reads or short reads, then they can be handled in a seamless manner. And Smith-Waterman, the dynamic programming phase is separated from BW index search, which was actually not the case with some aligners that are available outside. So with this, actually we are able to handle unlimited number of gaps and mismatches. In the dynamics programming stage, we can specify how many number of gaps or mismatches we would like to handle. So, and the big thing is the reduced memory requirement at the expense of speed without sacrificing any correctness actually. So with this, we are able to run the alignment on 4 GB machines. So, and of course, now what we do is we are also going to look at the available memory on the machine and then create the appropriate index. If the machine happens to have a higher amount of memory, then we will be able to do the alignment much faster. But even the low memory systems also will be able to do the alignment. That's the main objective here actually. So all exact matches of read can be found in time proportional to the length of the read, and which is actually largely independent of the size of the reference. So even when there are mismatches, the time is largely independent of the size of the reference, though it will be more than what we spend in finding an exact match. So just one slide on the parameters that we actually take in our tool for doing the alignment. As you can see here, the minimum alignment score you can specify, or it can also be specified as the number of mismatches that you allow and number of gaps allowed, and certain other reporting parameters like how many, if there are multiple matches to the read, so how many you would like to report, etc. will take from the user. Then another set of parameters on trimming. Sometimes actually what happens is the NGS, the sequencing technology adds some adapters to the reads before they are sequenced for certain reasons. So the reads that come to us for alignment will have some substrings of the adapter. So adapter is known in advance, so we actually trim the reads based on the adapter sequence and then do the alignment. So last one is actually a certain set of screening databases we provide with the tool, and the reads are screened against these databases. These are typically sequences from some viral and other organisms, which could be contaminants when we actually prepare the sample and then do the sequencing. So we want to get rid of those contaminants. So what we do is we do the so we screen the reads against these databases. If they happen to match these databases, we actually remove them from the list of reads to be aligned, and then proceed with the alignment on the rest of the reads actually. Okay, so a couple of extensions that what we have talked about is actually the basic alignment problem, where we have a single read which is processed independently of the other reads, and we just try to get a contiguous match on the reference. But it's possible that some of the sequencers actually give what are called paired reads. So you have a couple of pair of reads which are known to be separated by a certain amount of distance. So when you align them to the reference, you also expect a similar amount of distance between these two, and associated logic needs to be taken care of when we align these paired reads. And RNA read alignment is another aspect where you have the so-called spliced reads. Part of the read comes from one segment of the reference, and another part comes from a different segment. So, but in this case, these segments are actually known in advance. So, whereas in split read alignment, these segments are also not known. So, the DNA itself actually could have undergone some variations, large-scale structural variations, because of which part of the reference or chromosome could have been deleted at one place and it gets inserted in a different place. So, how do we detect such things? So, all that can be handled using split read alignment, where we take the read and then look for alignments which need not be contiguous actually. Part of the read can be located in one chromosome, other part can be in a completely different chromosome as well. So the local realignment is another thing where the overall alignment, when we align the set of reads, we only align each read independently of the other reads. So we don't really know whether the alignment is exact, or because of the penalties that we have used, there could be some artifacts. So what happens is, when you align a bunch of reads and look at a particular region and all the reads that align to that region, you may see different possible alignments there. So when you look at all these reads and try to get a consensus alignment, so that is what we do in local realignment. So after the original alignment is done, we look at certain regions, take all the reads that are aligned to that region, and arrive at a consensus alignment based on that. So we actually look at other reads also in this case to adjust the alignment. Okay, some optimizations, obvious optimizations that we have incorporated in our tool are like allow use of multiple cores and processes. The reads can be aligned in parallel. Obviously, very inherent parallelism is available there. So also one thing that we are introducing in the upcoming version of our tool is SIMD processing. So the multiple dynamic programming instances do similar operations on different data. So we actually use the SIMD feature of the processors to speed up further. And as I mentioned earlier, we are also scaling the speed with more memory. In case the systems have more memory, we sample the BWT index at a higher rate and increase the speed. So these two together actually have given a speed up of 2 to 3 times in our version that's under development now. So that's all I have about this alignment. Any questions?
Thank you, Dr. Shanmugh, for that lucid explanation of BWT and some of its implementation issues. I would like to call upon Professor Murli to hand over the